what I want. And you know very well I won't do it. You're no fun, you know that? I can tell that you want to do it, though. You've nearly done it before. Why not rip the Band-Aid off and give it another go? Every time. Welcome to Series September! This year we're going over another popular young adult science fiction series, Divergent. You know the drill. I'm going to be looking at all the books in the series and then doing an analysis on the series as a whole. Quick disclaimer, I did not read the collection of short stories centering around 4 since that was both a prequel and a retelling of the trilogy. I also did not read We Can Be Mended since I had no idea it was out at the time of making this series of videos. It is also a short story. If you guys want to go read those, it's perfectly fine. I'm not your mom. I can't tell you what you can and can't read. I can only recommend. Anyways, Divergent was written by Veronica Roth and published in 2011. I believe I got a box set of this series for my birthday one year, around the same time the movie was about to hit theaters. All 3 books in the series were out when I started reading them, so I didn't have to wait for each book to release. Now, as this is science fiction, you know the drill, we have to go over the world. So, this is a dystopian world where the city is split up into 5 factions: Abnegation, Amity, Candor, Dauntless, and Erudite. Now, these are actual words, and I have their definitions right here on screen. Each faction is supposed to eradicate qualities that will lead people to do evil. Abnegation is supposed to eradicate selfishness, so they focus on being selfless. Amity is supposed to eradicate aggression, so they focus on peace and being kind. Candor is supposed to eradicate dishonesty, so they focus on being honest. Dauntless is supposed to eradicate cowardice, so they focus on being brave. And Erudite is supposed to eradicate ignorance, so they focus on being smart. The citizens of this city are divided into these factions, and every year, the 16-year-olds have to take an aptitude test, which determines which faction they belong to. Then they have to choose their faction in a ceremony. Now, the common phrase that everyone lives by in this world is faction before blood, which means your faction is more important than your family. It is possible for a 16-year-old to choose the faction they were raised in and continue living there, but it is also possible for them to choose a different faction that they most resonate with. That faction provides an initiation process to determine who is worthy of staying in the faction and who will become factionless. The factionless wander the streets with no job and no home. The only people who help them are the Abnegation. The Abnegation control most of the government, but each faction has their own appointed leaders, and they all work together to keep the peace. Now, when you're part of a faction, that faction is your whole life and personality. When you choose a new faction, you have to abandon all the stuff you learned in your home faction and focus on changing your personality to suit the new faction you're part of. Now, it seems pretty black and white, doesn't it? Well, there is one small gray area. See, it's possible to become part of a category known as Divergent. Being Divergent means that the test says you could belong to multiple factions. The test is supposed to help you know that you belong to one faction, not many. We'll get into more details on being Divergent later. Now, you're probably wondering about the city. It's Chicago. Seriously, this whole story takes place in post-apocalyptic Chicago. Anyway, let's get to the story. Beatrice Prior is a 16-year-old girl from Abnegation. Her brother Caleb has also turned 16. It's time to be tested. Now, the test is a simulation via an injection with a special serum designed by the Erudite. Well, it seems Beatrice's results are inconclusive, which labels her as Divergent, which is very dangerous. Tori, the dauntless woman who watched over the test, plans to hide Beatrice's Divergent status by putting her results as Abnegation, when in reality, Beatrice's results were Abnegation, Dauntless, and Erudite. The time of the choosing ceremony has come, and Beatrice must choose. She's sad to see that Caleb has chosen Erudite, but now it's her turn. Beatrice ends up choosing Dauntless. Now, here's how Dauntless initiation begins. The initiates must jump onto a moving train and then jump off the moving train onto a tall building. Then they have to jump into a hole nearby without knowing what's at the bottom. Ned is at the bottom, don't worry. Beatrice is the first to jump, which is shocking to everyone. Oh yeah, every other faction calls people from Abnegation stiffs. I just thought I'd add that in there. Now, Beatrice is greeted by her instructor named Four. When asked for her name, Beatrice tells him her name is Triss. Well, other initiates make their way down, and it's almost time to begin training. Triss befriends a few of the initiates, Christina, Will, and Al. But it seems Triss has also gained some enemies in Peter, Drew, and Molly. The top 10 Dauntless initiates will stay. The rest will become factionless. So the first phase of initiation and training is physical skill. Triss and the other initiates are taught how to handle guns, knives, and hand-to-hand combat. The initiates also have to fight each other. However, the fights have to last until one knocks the other out. Tapping out is seen as a sign of cowardice, even though it didn't used to be that way. Christina actually gets punished for that by having to hang over the edge of the pit, which is a very deep ravine. Triss also ends up standing in for Al when he refuses to pick up his knives while everyone else is throwing them at targets. What I mean by that is, Triss stands in front of the target while Four throws knives in her direction. Now, something clearly isn't right here. Part of training is also learning how to work together as a team via a game of Capture the Flag, and that's where Triss and Four start to become a little closer. Triss also learns during this time that Four is actually afraid of heights. Alright, it's time for the rankings. Triss is ranked 6th due to her size and current lack of strength, and Peter is ranked 2nd, just below Edward, an initiate who studied combat for fun. Well, since Peter didn't take too kindly to that, he stabs Edward in the eye while he's asleep. Edward decides to become factionless since his girlfriend Myra was also about to become factionless, and he can't live without her. Now, Peter is now ranked 1st. After these events, a Dauntless-born initiate named Uriah decides to invite Triss to come with him and the other Dauntless to their initiation ritual. Triss ends up befriending more Dauntless and gaining their respect. Now it's time to begin Phase 2 of training. Facing your fears via hallucinations from serum. Four is in charge of distributing and testing at this point, and Triss seems to be doing pretty well. Well, it's visiting day. Families from other factions can visit if they want, but it doesn't usually happen since leaving your home faction can be seen as a betrayal. But it seems Triss's mom has come by to visit. She tells Triss to go to the erudite and ask Caleb to research the simulation serum. Why doesn't she go do it herself? Well, turns out the erudite aren't permitting anyone from abnegation into their faction, not even for visits. Triss's mom also tells her to be strong, but not to draw too much attention to herself. Gotta make sure nobody knows she's actually Divergent. And it turns out that erudite is not too pleased about abnegation running most of the government, and rumors start to spread about abnegation. Such rumors include that Triss's parents were cruel to her and Caleb, so that's why they chose different factions. The accusations are also on Marcus, an abnegation leader, who was accused of abusing his son, who left abnegation for Dauntless 2 years before these events. The abnegation are also accused of hoarding supplies. Now, these rumors spread like wildfire when Molly, who wasn't too happy with Triss beating her in hand-to-hand combat, tells erudite journalists about this. Now, Triss and Caleb actually had a very good family life. I just want to make that clear. Phase 2 of training continues, and Triss seems to be doing a little too well. Apparently, being Divergent means you can manipulate the simulation. Four notices this and tells Triss not to do that again. The point of this training is to face your fear in a hallucination and then slow down your heart rate enough to the point where you're calm. They didn't necessarily say how you had to do it, but you had to do it and face your fear head on. So for example, if your fear was drowning, you would just swim deeper. What Triss would do is just find a way around these fears to avoid them by manipulating the simulation. Now wait a minute. How would Four know about how Divergence worked? Could it be perhaps that he's Divergent as well? That's not important right now because due to Triss's Divergence, she's ranked 1st since she's able to exit her simulations faster than anyone else. This draws negative attention to her, and Peter recruits the help of Drew and Al to kidnap her and throw her into the pit. But thankfully, Four was able to intervene and save Triss's life. Four tells Triss to allow herself to be vulnerable so that her friends are able to help her and be on her side. If she doesn't allow herself to be vulnerable, she won't be welcomed. Well, Triss's friends are not too happy about what Al did. While he didn't want to do the deed, he helped. Al begs Triss for forgiveness, but she rejects him. Al, not wanting to live with that guilt, jumps to his death into the pit. While Triss is dealing with that loss, she starts to get to know Four a little better. She even gets to go through his fear landscape. The fear landscape is supposed to be an area where you can see other people's fears if you take the right injections tying to that person. 4 shows Triss his fears, and by doing so reveals that he got his nickname because he only has 4 fears. He also reveals his name, Tobias. He is Marcus's son, and the rumors about Marcus were true. Tobias and Triss start to form a more romantic relationship, but since training isn't fully complete, Triss is told to keep their relationship secret so that people won't think Triss was chosen out of favoritism. Triss finally makes her way to the Erudite to speak with Caleb about the serum, but in that process, she ends up being taken to Janine Matthews, an Erudite leader who has been spreading those rumors about abnegation. Janine is starting to suspect Triss isn't who the tests say she is, but dismisses her back to Dauntless since she can't really prove anything right now. Well, Tobias has been doing some digging and finds out that the Erudite plan to use Dauntless to launch an attack on abnegation. Him and Triss aren't really sure how they plan to do that, but that's not important now since Triss has to go through her own fear landscape. Now, only the leaders of Dauntless can see her fear landscape, and it's discovered that Triss only has 6 fears. Anyways, after Triss is done with her fear landscape, she's given a tracking serum which they say is to track her down if she's reported missing. Every Dauntless is injected with this. But it seems that Triss has found out the real purpose of that serum is to mind control the Dauntless to fight for the Erudite. Since Triss is Divergent, the serum does not affect her. It seems Tobias is Divergent as well, since the serum doesn't affect him either. The two try to blend in as the zombified Dauntless murder innocent people. They are caught, but try to escape to the abnegation compound when Triss is shot. Tobias doesn't want to leave her behind, and they are captured and taken before Janine. Janine had been testing a new serum that is supposed to work on Divergent individuals, so she plans to test it on Tobias since Triss is injured. Triss is to be killed. Tobias is given the injection, unwillingly, and it makes him see his friends as enemies and his enemies as friends. He has independent thought, but he doesn't get to decide who his friends and enemies are. Tobias is overseeing the control of the Dauntless in the control room at the Dauntless compound. Triss is rescued by her mother, who is later killed as they escape to a place where most of the abnegation are hiding. However, as Triss is escaping, she is forced to kill Will. Triss finds her dad and Caleb and tells them the truth behind the attack. Now, Triss's dad, Marcus, and Caleb make their way to the Dauntless compound to get to the control room and stop the Dauntless from killing more people. Peter ends up joining the party since he wasn't under the influence of the serum due to his murderous tendencies, but since Triss shot him in the leg, he can't really retaliate. Triss and her dad try to get to the control room, but he is killed on the way there. Tobias is there to greet Triss in the control room, and he nearly shoots her, but Triss basically sacrifices herself, pretty much allowing him to shoot her. But he doesn't do it since he snapped back to reality as he was about to pull the trigger. Tobias comes back to his senses and gets the data for the serum and manages to get the Dauntless people to wake up to what they're doing. The group ends up taking the train to the Amity faction, where they hope to find more abnegation survivors. Well, that was a lot to unpack. I'll try to keep this analysis brief so we can get through everything this series has to offer. There's a lot of focus on how the Dauntless are viewed. They're viewed as arrogant. Triss even has to put on this facade to sell to Janine that she really does belong in Dauntless, despite her test saying she belongs in abnegation. See, you also notice that the Dauntless are trained to be more prideful and murderous. I mentioned earlier that tapping out from the fight was viewed as cowardice. Tobias mentions that it didn't used to be like that. It's brave to acknowledge another person's strength. Eric, the Dauntless leader, is trying to train bloodthirsty killing machines while Tobias is trying to teach the actual values of the Dauntless. Some of Triss's friends were originally from Kandor, where they are brutally honest and have no filter. They can also read body language to tell when someone is lying. Christina points that out a lot. She also mentions that the initiation test for Kandor is taking a lie detector test when you're supposed to share all your deepest, darkest secrets. That's horrifying to think about. Janine is described as looking at everything from a logical perspective. She noticed that she wasn't getting the power she deserved since she believed she was smarter than everyone else and she'll get rid of anyone to do it. She also seems very inhuman since she's very nonchalant about killing people. She doesn't care who dies as long as she gets what she wants. Janine is basically using her knowledge as a weapon, and that can be horrifying. Also, faction before blood. Clearly a message here is family is very important since one of Triss's fears is being forced to kill her family. Also, her mom still wanted to help her despite Triss's choice. Triss still went out of her way to protect her family and the people she loved, despite them being part of a different faction. So that makes the phrase faction before blood kind of obsolete. Alright, there's a whole lot more I want to cover, but a lot of it ties to the other books, so I'll go over it in the series analysis. Overall, this is a fun read. It's very entertaining. It has moments that made me laugh and moments that made me cry. And there were some moments that made me mad, but that's normal. I didn't realize how good this book was, as I hadn't read it in 10 years. There was a film adaptation that came out 9 years ago as well. I haven't seen the movie since I saw it in theaters, but I remember it being mostly accurate to the book, except for the climax, where Triss actually takes on Janine. I understand why this decision was made, but it didn't hit as hard as the climax in the book. I'd recommend this book for ages 15 and up. It does get pretty violent and there are some mature themes within, but other than that, it's an easy read and educates you on some big words. It was a fun experience reading this again after 10 years. I remember this series being pretty popular among my peers. Thanks for listening to me talk about this, and I hope to see you soon as we continue the journey with Insurgent. Happy reading!